This is in North Hollywood, California. And of course, we're talking about the A77Xs here. So I got into the music industry like a lot of people, playing in bands. I went to school for music production, worked for a really awesome recording studio in San Francisco called Studio Trilogy, and moved on to teaching some at SAE up there in the Bay Area. Moved down here to LA, worked for a mixing engineer named Eric Madrid, whose mixes you probably heard on the radio before. And then now I'm working for Adam Audio, a product specialist out here based in LA. Anything you need from Adam Audio that comes through the West Coast is probably coming from my mouth and my keyboard strokes, so now you got a face to the name. There's the camera. Now you got a face to the name. So one of my favorite projects that I worked on was with a good friend of mine, Kevin Droz. He's a great guitar player, amazing with creating soundscapes with guitar pedals, and he's just a really fluid player, kind of plays unlike anyone I've ever come across. And he and I did a record that we put out actually on cassette as well as online. Long songs, big movements and everything. He was the creative force on that, coming up with a lot of the guitar and melodic ideas, a lot of the rhythm ideas as well. I played drums and engineered and produced the record, so that's a really cool one. Given my involvement with Adam Audio, I've had the opportunity to get to know every monitor in our line, despite the fact that back on the wall back there, we've got a couple of S5Hs in this room. We're gonna look at the A77Xs, which I kind of have as like a near field, midfield really, in this room, and they work tremendously in that sense. I love listening to them for a long time because I don't get fatigued. I'm not someone who listens at high volumes a lot, but later in the day, if I do go to high volumes, I know that I can still make educated choices, especially with EQ, on what I'm doing up there. So having like the air motion transformer tweeter that the frequency response goes up to 50K just makes it so crystal clear in the top end that I know if I'm overdoing it, because I never want to overdo it and have the mastering engineer come in and try and turn down the top end. When I first started working with the A77X, which was years before my involvement with Adam Audio, I knew that I could place things really well in terms of EQ in the mid-range, which is something that, a lot of times I feel like a lot of monitors struggle with. Kind of why a lot of guys have to still have the NS10 in their studio is to figure out that mid-range. With the A77X having a little bit more of a forward mid-range, you know if your mid-range is right or if it's wrong, just because of the way that the A77X reacts to it. It's got a lot to do with the unique 2.5 way topology that it has, which, I don't need to get into a lot here, but if you're curious about it, definitely read up on the way that the A77X is amplified. All in all though, the mid-range is something that is probably the most important part of your mix. The low end of the A77X is great in the sense that it doesn't overdo it and overhype the low end. I'd like to kind of dive in, get it right, and then not assume that the monitors are adding a whole bunch of low end that's not really there. And getting good low end on mixes is probably the most difficult thing to do, and it's the most requested thing that you get from artists, is everyone wants some big, meaty, thick low end. And it's a little tough to do that if your monitors are giving you an excessive amount of low end. With the A77X, I love using the Sub15, this monster over here that you can see. It's something that I couldn't really live without at this point. They work so well together, and that the SPLs are so close that if I turn up the A77X, the Sub15 is going to follow. It's not going to bottom out and give me an unrealistic view of what's happening in the low end. Getting that translation is just tremendous. You always want to, you want to cover the whole spectrum when you're mixing or recording, so having a subwoofer is extremely critical for that process. I'm not talking about just reproducing low frequencies loud. I'm talking about reproducing low frequencies in terms of reach So we're not trying to get, you know, really loud 30 hertz. I want to get really low 20 hertz. And having that low end makes mixing and recording so much easier. I can't recommend it more.